Apple is doing a reboot, so I don't have the agenda in front of me, but thank you. Perfect. So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and there's only one item of business on this community group enhancement funding, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Casulet.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So in 2021, Council approved community group funding operating grants for 2022 and 2023. The approved budget for 2023 community group enhancement funding is $74,529, and 7 applications were received for this funding stream. Administration respectfully assumes that Council has read the community group funding report and will provide some highlights regarding the recommendations for grant funding allocations contained in the report. The Camp Tamarack Association is seeking funding support for a camp program for children of all abilities, as well as a camp program for adults living with exceptionalities. The association offers a subsidy program to supplement camp fees and reduce barriers to participation. This program aligns with Council's strategic priority of inclusive, caring community and also Council's focus area of active lifestyle. The funding recommendation of $5,000 matches the level of funding provided by another municipal partner. The Kool-Aid Society of Grande Prairie offers a drop-in program for youth in grades 1 to 12. The community group funding policy states that the city will not recommend funding for a community group or agency that receives funding from another city department for the same project or program. The Kool-Aid Society of Grande Prairie received grant funding through the FCSS funding stream in 2022 and is anticipated to be funded again in 2023, and therefore would not be eligible for a grant under the enhancement funding stream. The Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club. The Arctic Winter Games Fund is a legacy of the multi-sport games which were held in Grande Prairie in 2010. A total of $12,000 is available through the fund each year, and this is typically the interest from the endowment fund. This recreational amenity serves the Grande Prairie region and aligns with Council's strategic priority of quality of life and the focus area of active lifestyle. The recommendation for operational funding also meets the criteria of the Arctic Winter Games Fund. The Grande Prairie Curling Center. Programming for this organization includes Learn to Curl, as well as curling opportunities for youth, adults, seniors, and people with disabilities. This recreational facility serves the Grande Prairie region and aligns with Council's strategic priority of quality of life and the focus area of active lifestyle. Funding will support operational needs as well as equipment and supplies to support new sport and recreation uses. Administration recommends that Council consider funding allocation of $64,529. For the United Way Alberta Northwest, this organization relies mainly on grants and provincial funding. Remaining revenue is generated typically through donations and fundraising. The United Way does not provide service directly through this program, therefore, administration considers that it would not be eligible for funding through this stream. The Grande Prairie Rotary Club, this organization relies solely on club fees and fundraising. Again, because the club does not provide this service directly, administration recommends that they would not be eligible for funding under this stream. For the Wapiti Nordic Ski Club, this multi-season recreational facility serves the Grande Prairie region and aligns with Council's strategic priority of quality of life and the focus area of active lifestyle. This funding recommendation matches the level of funding provided by another municipal partner. The city is a proud supporter of many local organizations making a positive impact in the community. Administration recommends that Council approve the 2023 Community Group Enhancement Funding as presented in Table 1. And then also that Council approve operational funding of $12,000 for Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club for 2023 from the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. The third recommendation is as a result of a Grande Prairie Curling Club presentation to committee on May 24th, where the club was seeking support for operation of the facility on a year-round basis. So this recommendation is that Council directs administration to submit a mid-year capital budget request to hire professional services to evaluate the feasibility of converting the Grande Prairie Curling Center to year-round facility. And with that, I am open to any questions.
Great. Thank you for that. First in the queue, Councillor Blackmore.
I have 3 questions. The first one is, I'm wondering if the grant qualifications need to be written a little tighter so that you don't have applications in the future that don't qualify, such as a Rotary Club and the United Way. I guess you don't really need to respond to that. It's not really a question, but I'm thinking that organizations that raised funds should not be applying to the city for funds. Regarding the curling club, I have 2 questions. One is, you said in one of your comments that if they receive funds from other city departments, they don't qualify for the grant. Do they not receive funds elsewhere from the city?
Ms. Casually.
Thank you. Through the chair, they receive funding through a lease agreement, so it is not limited to, so it doesn't preclude them from receiving funds through this stream.
Okay, so it's not a grant, so therefore they qualify for this one.
Correct.
Okay. And then my other question was regarding the costs of them doing their study. Do we have any idea what that is? Like, you have no dollar figure attached to that.
Ms. Casually.
Thank you. Through the chair, in discussion with corporate facility management, the mid-year capital request would be funding up to $20,000 to hire an engineer services to figure out what might be required to make the facility available for that.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. A couple questions about the GP Speed Skaters Club and specifically the funding source. Did we give them money from Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund last year too? Am I recalling that correctly?
Ms. Casually.
Through the chair, Councillor Bressie, yes, that is correct. The funding was provided to them through the AWG fund.
Was that the first year we gave them funding through that fund, or how many years, if we grant them funding from Arctic Winter Games this year, how many years in a row would that be that we were using that fund for them?
Thank you. Through the chair, this would be the second year that we've done that, and it was a result of changes to the criteria for the grant that council approved 2 years ago.
Gotcha. And has there been any conversation yet about, I assume we're going to get a similar ask from them next year. Has there been any conversation yet about, is this an ongoing funding source we want to consider for them, or are there other funding sources we maybe want to consider putting them onto if they keep on coming asking for funding?
Through the chair, certainly there is opportunity through the AWG fund. It is an endowment fund, so the interest earned from the legacy fund is certainly sufficient to provide this support on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Thanks, Ms. Cajolet. Just a couple questions. I guess I'll start with the one that got triggered by Gladys's question. And that's in regards to, I guess, the lease agreement. I know we may not be able to do specifics and stuff, but with this funding amount going to the curling club, is that meant to offset some of their utility costs, or is that covered in the lease agreement?
Ms. Casually.
Through the chair, the lease agreement does provide a subsidy for operational expenses.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The other question that I had is, when we're talking about community group enhancement funding, I was going over policy 315 over the weekend, and I was a bit curious, just from the recommended amounts, in regards to the curling center, it's $64,529, but under the community group enhancement funding, it's up to a maximum of $14,999. So I think Ms. Blackmore said how we can tighten this up. What is our justification for going over like $55,000 on that one?
Ms. Casually.
Thank you. Through the chair, the recommendation is based on previous requests for support. So certainly the policy would dictate a grant of $14,999, and then council could, if they support the recommendation, could certainly approve it at that level, making an exception to the policy, or simply approve funding at the $14,999 value.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I see no one else in the queue, so I had a couple questions. Can you tell me the total support for the curling club, including the lease at this point?
Currently, they receive $74,300 annually.
And also, can you remind me, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were an organization that requested operational support for wages during COVID, is that correct?
Thank you, through the mayor. They have been the recipient of emergency community group funding, yes.
And to a total of how much?
If you can give me one moment, I can
no
get that
worries.
for you.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, the Grande Prairie Curling Center received emergency community group funding in the amount of about $47,400 in 2021, and in 2020 they received emergency funding in the amount of $100,000.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, they're looking for another 166,000. The recommendation is for almost 65. With the lease, they're close to 75. Plus, they got $40,000 last year. With the shortfall of $100,000 that they're looking for, and we're not going to give them, is there consideration or expectation they're going to come to us in a few months and look for that shortfall that we're not funding them in community group funding?
Through the chair, as part of the motion from the last committee meeting, administration does intend to bring back with the feasibility study results as to what would be required to potentially make the facility available for year-round operations. Administration could certainly bring back some information regarding an operational model for the curling center.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Blackmore.
I guess I'm kind of really struggling to understand the whole finance picture of the curling club. And I'm wondering why you chose 64,529. Like it's an odd number, so I'm wondering why that was the number that is the result of your recommendations. And let's start there.
Thank you. Through the chair, the budget for the enhancement funding is only $74,500 and change. So with recommendations for $10,000 to other community groups, this would be the balance of the enhancement fund for the approved budget for 2023.
Another question? The curling club went through a variety of changes somewhere around 2011 or something, and I'm not sure any longer. Do they don't own the building, or they do own their building? How much? They're like a sponge looking for funding. It's like how much? Yeah, when do we quit? And how much control do we have over their organization, if any?
Ms. Casually?
Thank you. Through the chair. So the city owns the facility. The curling club operates programs and services out of it. So all of the facility maintenance, preventative maintenance, and repairs would be provided by the city. I think the last time that we looked at that number in 2020, it was would be gift in kind of approximately $270,000. And certainly they're a community partner, so administration works with them closely, but there's no administrative member or anybody on the board to provide any information in that regard.
And do we provide that same kind of support to other sporting organizations, like to soccer or football or anything?
Just casually.
Through the chair, there are a number of community groups that do receive that sort of support. So Center for Creative Arts would be one example where the city owns the facility and the organization operates.
But with the same financial support in addition to the building?
Through the chair, in that example, that particular community group also receives an operating grant, core-funded operating grant through community group funding that would be actually larger than this proposed grant for the Curling Centre.
All right, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much. I just maybe I'm wrong here, so please, Ms. Casually, correct me. But I think when that $100,000 emergency use was done, it was to purchase brand new curling stones for the club. I could be wrong on that one, but I know that there was a request a couple budgets ago that we had tabled to help out, but I'm not sure. So yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong there. I do have a question though, but I stand to be corrected if you're going to correct me.
Through the chair, the emergency community group funding was to provide support for staff costs as well as an additional utility subsidy that year.
So I stand to be corrected. Thank you so much for that. I guess my question is really around point 3. The $20,000 to evaluate the feasibility of converting the curling club. Is this a necessary expense? I don't know. I used to promote like music shows for all ages in the upstairs lounge at the curling center back in the in the year 2000s, I guess, for half a decade there. And it was good. It was over the summertime. I know that they've been, at least according to Mr. Griffith, they've been having some funerals and some weddings there. So it seems like there's opportunity that we're already aware of, but to spend an extra $20,000 for a feasibility when I think, are we just looking for the need? Like, can we fill this space over the summer or what?
Just casually.
Through the chair, the intent of that funding is to assess the lower level of the building primarily. So as an example, we do know that in the arena area where the ice is typically, or ice would be held, that area of the building does not have air conditioning, so would make use of that very difficult during the summer months. So there is also a possibility that with increased usage of the building that may change some requirements for fire codes and things like that. So this study would determine what may be needed in that case.
So just to top up on that, thank you for that answer. Would we also be investigating the extra usage of utilities there? So let's say the curling club said, oh, we want to do some summer ice here, or we want to add some AC. It might mean extra an extra investment from the city of Grande Prairie. Are we going to look at the extra draw that we might take in from the utilities there as well?
Certainly, through the chair, certainly that would be administration's intent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. My question is, again, with the curling club, with every question that a councillor or the mayor asks, there's another number that gets thrown in. I would love to get this in my mind correctly, like 270,000 and then 74,000 we give them now. Can you and then they're requesting 166 and potentially 64. I would love exactly what we give them and how we're breaking this down because it seems discombobulated to me when $270,000 comes out of one of the questions that was like 5 minutes later. So can you just from start to finish, what are we supporting and what are they asking? And then in part with that, this recommendation for 64,000, will that be for what the request was approximately a month ago for a year-round facility? Is this the money that we would potentially be giving them to hire a full-time staff or look into the marketing campaigns for the club. Exactly, what is this ask for? And then the total mindset of what's happening there.
Ms. Casually?
Okay, through the chair. So currently, the Grande Prairie Curling Center does receive funding through a lease agreement with the city. The building that they operate is owned by the city of Grande Prairie. So the $270,000 number would be the facility maintenance and any repairs that were done to the building. I think, don't quote me, but I think that was in 2020, that number was. The request in follow-up to the presentation made to committee a couple of weeks ago, the annual funding request for the curling center is $166,000. Administration is recommending $64,000 towards that through this community enhancement stream funding.
Okay, and what about the 74,300? What's that?
Through the chair, that would be the utility subsidy.
That is outside of the building maintenance of 270,000?
That is correct.
Holy moly, that is an expensive building. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Berg.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. One of the things that I'm curious to know, and I don't know if you have this number handy, but from the different events that come to us through the curling club, is there some calculation that we can find the economic benefit of the curling club? Again, I don't expect you to have that now, but there's more. Is there a way to find it?
So I'll just maybe help Councillor Berg. Have we ever done a STEAM report on any curling club events?
Through the chair, yes, certainly there has been. I don't have that information available, but certainly could provide it to council.
Wonderful, thank you.
I don't see anybody in the queue, so I'm going to change the questions just for a minute. Obviously, come back wherever you want. Question for Ms. Whiteway, as I see she's here. Can you tell me how close we are on seeing a gift in kind report for organizations such as curling clubs, other ones that we're currently supporting?
Thank you, through the mayor. So our intent was to have we are beginning tracking, so by the end of 2022, to have that picture. So it would be available in time for next year's community group funding council committee meeting.
Great, thank you. I had another question regarding the Kool-Aid Society. Maybe Director Miller or Ms. Cajolet can tell me. I recall that we used to fund them. Do we fund them from a different group now, or is it just not at all anymore? I just don't remember.
Through the chair, that organization is currently funded through FCSS funding stream, through Community Social Development.
So thank you for that. So this request was in addition to what they're currently getting from FCSS?
That is correct.
Okay. Any other questions from council? I got Councillor Bressy and then Councillor Blackmore.
Great. I'm just wondering, the 5,000 for the Nordic Center and the 5,000 for the Camp Tamarack Association. Can you just give me a bit of context about how administration settled on the $5,000 recommendation instead of 10,000, 2,000? Just why'd that 5,000 seem like the right number?
Thank you, through the chair. That funding recommendation aligns with funding that they received from another municipal partner. So,
excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. This question is for Ms. Whiteway. Regarding the gift in kind report, is it possible we could get that before budget? It would be helpful for us, I think.
Ms. Whiteway.
Thank you, through the mayor. We can certainly look at gathering as much information as possible. So it would be perhaps more of a year-to-date amount. We could get something like that in time for budget.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor O'Toole.
I don't know who to ask this question to, but we've been giving the curling club a lot of money. Do they generate enough money to cover their costs? Like, are we subsidizing them completely, or is there a generation that they can actually take money out of?
Ms. Casually?
Thank you. Through the chair. The club certainly does generate revenue from operation of the kitchen, also club fees for league play and things like that. Based on the presentation they gave to committee, it is anticipated that that is not sufficient to meet their current operations.
Okay, so would they generate $500,000 a year kind of deal? If you have the information, that's fine. If you don't,
Through the chair, the details of that information are not readily available.
fair enough. Thank you.
CEO Nicolay.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship. I've been listening with interest to the questions and the information that's being provided by management, and feverishly making some notes. We are going to get through this particular request, but there have been a number of requests for elaboration to make council's decision more comprehensive and more thoughtful. And so I'd like to assure council that that will be a priority for management. We will strive to get it as thorough as we can get it before the budget deliberations upcoming. But the broader issue is when council makes these kinds of decisions, obviously you'd like to make them in the presence of full facts. Some of the notes that I've just jotted down are that for all community group funding that occurs through the City of Grande Prairie, council would like a summary of operating funding, summary of capital funding, history, current, and planned. So to the degree that we can look out into the future, what are these organizations going to need? What is the timing so that we can see whether these are all coming forward at the same time, and we believe that this is the quantum of capital that's being dispersed into community groups annually, or whether we have visibility of that particular aspect, including all in-kind. And this is something that has been perplexing local government for a long, long time. When we make a piece of land available, it has a implied lease value if we were to lease that land commercially. And yet local governments are quite reticent to try to identify that as a value that's being distributed into the community. I'm hearing loud and clear on several occasions from this council that that's a number that you would like to have, and it can be qualified as an estimate or a market-sensitive number, but you'd like to have an idea of what the in-kind is right through to the implied lease value of land. I've also heard several references to business models. So what is the business model of the community group that's being funded? What are the metrics? What are their revenue cost ratio? What are their metrics for performance that council can use to determine whether they're being effective in their use of public funds? And finally, I've heard a number of references in the time that I've been here to calculating and declaring the implied econometric value of these community groups in the community. So the STEAM model is a very adept model for doing that kind of thing. But where we have an indication of what a community group provides to the community in terms of value, that's a number that should be visible when council is considering further financial support. So those are just notes that I've written down now. We will bring back to council an abstract of what we would hope to prepare in terms of a comprehensive report. Make sure that we're not missing anything, there are no gaps. Make sure that there's no superfluous information that we're out there gathering that council wouldn't see value in. And we'll get that underway and make sure that these decisions are easier for council to make in the presence of full information going forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I mean, I think just to add a bit to that, this is the first iteration of community group funding that this council has seen. So it makes sense that there's going to be likely more questions. But Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton. And I really like what CEO Nikolai has brought forward. And we're curious, what's the value to the community? And at the same time, are we funding a ship that's sinking? And so we don't want to get in the business of running the curling rink. So should we have somebody on their board as a representative of council just to get a closer view on things, or does that put us in a conflict of interest ourselves? So I'm just curious. I think this almost is like an empty pit, but if you can money pit, sorry, and if you come back and say, hey, there's value, they bring this economic driving to the city, then you got to balance that. So I think we really need to look at that. I sat on the Crystal Center Advisory Committee for 20 years, and we could never get the costs to even break even. The lowest we ever got it was minus 495,000, and I think it's over the million now. So, what's the value of that facility? So I know I'm off topic, but I just want to use that as an example. There is a value that it brings to the community, and how much do we need to support it? Because I don't think they will ever make money.
Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be digging into these bigger questions, see where this council goes with community group funding, and I love what I'm hearing there in terms of rigor for some organizations. Just also want to counsel caution and administration in terms of the materiality of the grants we're doing too, where we've got, and I don't hear anybody suggesting, but we got 2 organizations we're giving $5,000 to here, and I'd hate to spend hours and hours and hours and hours of time analyzing those amounts. I think we've got really brilliant people and well-experienced people that work for the city. We only have limited numbers of them, and I know one of the regrets that I have of last council is in an attempt to put more rigor towards community group funding, we kind of applied it across the spectrum. I think we spent a lot of time. I don't think we spent enough time digging into some of our larger community groups. I think we spent too much time digging into some of our smaller community groups, and because it felt easier, and in some ways it felt better, I think. But what I'm worried about that is when we're taking our brilliant minds that we have work for the city looking outside the organization, are we losing bigger opportunities to analyze cost savings within the organization? So just want to have some caution around materiality when we're having these conversations.
Thanks for that. I had a question in regards to the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. I don't know if everybody on council is aware of the criteria of it. So not saying that Peace Wapiti Skating Club isn't a good qualified candidate, but maybe if you could summarize why Peace Wapiti Skating Club would qualify compared to, say, the Curling Club for the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund.
Thank you, through the chair. So the Arctic Winter Games is an international celebration of sport and culture. The fund, Legacy Fund, is from the 2010 Arctic Winter Games, which were held in Grande Prairie in March of that year, and really made possible because of the overwhelming support of the community and the financial discipline of the host society. So the games were definitely a strong success because of the strong community, the regional partnerships that were fostered during the planning. And the intent of the Legacy Fund is to sort of expand those partnerships and create opportunities to bring youth-focused recreation, sport, and cultural events to Grande Prairie and region. Historically, the fund was utilized for bids for multi-sport games. The requirement for actually funding a bid application has definitely dwindled, and we're not seeing that over the years. So in 2020, administration recommended some changes to the Arctic Winter Games Fund to allow for operational funding for sports that certainly aligned with the intent of the Arctic Winter Games, so primarily focused on winter sports, and also ones that bring youth-focused opportunities, recreation sport, to Grande Prairie and the region. So in the last funding cycle for community group funding, council at that time made sort of approved the this organization as certainly meeting that criteria and recommendation. The recommendation or the changes to the fund allowed for the $12,000 to be available through the fund each year. And as mentioned previously, that is typically the interest that is created from the endowment fund. So the impact to the legacy fund is minimal.
And just before I get to those in the queue, can you tell me why, or is there a reason the curling club wouldn't qualify based on the cultural and sport combination?
Through the chair, no, administration had not considered that through this fund, but certainly could.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Just curious, how much money is in the Alberta Winter Games Fund?
Arctic Winter Games.
Arctic Winter Games Fund, and I kind of heard that you're saying we only spend the interest. Am I correct in saying?
Casually.
Thank you. Through the chair, the current balance of the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund is approximately $376,000, and to date, the criteria has been established that in order to ensure sustainability of the fund, that typically only the interest from the endowment fund is used for operational grants.
Which is roughly 12,000 or?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So for the curling club, if we're looking after the maintenance particularly and the utilities, I understand that. And in our, when the fellow came to talk about what they want to do in the future, they're also looking at, you know, $1 million parking lot potentially for asphalt and such too, or building, you know, a side building for, I believe it was garbage bins and stuff. But so we look after that part. They also fundraise to make money for their organization. Do we as a city receive a financial report at the end of the year like we do out of like the library or Creative Arts Center? Like how tied are we to this organization in that regard as we are to others that we basically own the facility?
Ms. Casually.
Through the chair, every community group or agency that receives community group funding is required to provide an annual funding report. So we do receive that from the Curling Center each year. The presentations that council sees are for community groups that receive $100,000 in community group funding support or more. So it's just those groups that are actually required to present to council, but all community groups do provide that annual report information.
So with the building maintenance of the total of $277,430, is that part included in the over 100,000, or are you only talking about this community group funding being the over 100,000?
Through the chair, it would be the operational grants issued through community group funding of $100,000 or more. Does not include any gift in kind.
Okay. Now, is that something we should look at? Because we're putting nearly $300,000 into this facility, and really don't know what's happening with it.
Through the chair, certainly administration does have a sense of the gift in kind provided to some community groups and agencies that are funded. And it is required for them to report that on their annual funding report for their operational grants.
Okay, well, I'll ask more questions one-on-one after, but I do believe in this organization, and I think they have, you know, some future potential that the staff there are working on that will make, you know, this community better overall. So it's not that we're against anything, or I'm not against anything. I just need to wrap my mind around exactly how much input the city has in regards to this organization.
Sorry, Director Miller, you had something to add?
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I know, we anticipated there would be a lot of questions about the curling club, and previous to the meeting, Ms. Cajolet and I did speak about what we should be doing is bring in another report to committee and try to address some of the questions about the curling club, about what the future holds, about if they could do more stuff during the summer as well to try to increase the revenue. So if it's okay with council, we'll commit to bringing a report in the near future with an update on the curling club on what how we see it operating in the future. We'll also do a comparison if they weren't operating themselves, if we took it internal, because that has been talked about somewhat in the past as an option. But so we recognize there's lots of questions outstanding with this ask, and we have provided significant support to the curling club over the last couple of years. So we can certainly bring more information back to committee and council.
Great, thank you. Councillor Lanners.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think we start to muddy the waters a little bit when we talk about, you know, we own the building and we're paying the operating grants, so that should include, you know, that should be included in their fees. And you could say the same thing for swimming in the library and the knowledge campus, and you go down the list of saying, well, every one of these people should be, you know, accounting for the building operation expenses that they're getting. If they did that, you know, we'd have a list, a lineup of people, you know, 20 deep of coming in here asking for money because they couldn't afford it. So I don't know if we want to cross those lines. And then I'm also, you know, a huge fan. I've seen what these community groups, they will suck, you know, blood out of a rock, most of these people, to kind of keep these organizations running, and they do it for way less than we would if we were trying to run that organization. I think that Colin Griffiths, I think he takes almost nothing for salary, and we've got, you know, you've got other staff that are just eking by, and they're running it as close as they can to the line, and they're coming in here asking for money. So, you know, I guess the question would be in the end is which ones do we want? Which one of these recreational activities do we want to die on the vine? Which one do we want to play God over? Is it curling that we want to let die? Is it swimming? Is it disc golf? Is it walking around the track that pays hardly any money and subsidizes it doesn't pay for itself? You know, you can go down the list and we can decide how we're going to slash the different sporting events and recreational opportunities without a model, though, that defines, you know, what we think is acceptable and how we think governance is acceptable. I think it's kind of a tough conversation to have because we're focusing in on one when, you know, we do the same thing for a lot. So I think we should be cautious about that, and I think we should work on trying to develop a model. But I don't know if they could do it any cheaper, and we had to basically decide if we like curling or not. And you know, it's a valuable thing in the community is that we're subsidizing, and are we subsidizing it enough or not? So I'm not trying to dissect it right now. It's more of a broad level thing for me. So I probably don't have a problem with this. It just seems weird. It's stuck in this funding model because they got nowhere else to go, and it just seems like a big number because they're in big, not really big trouble, but they have big costs, right? So yeah. So I more of a comment than anything else. I'll save you having to answer a question. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I'm finding that the Peace Wapiti speed skating is put in under this grant, and now it's being funded by the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. So, and then the curling club, I'm confused on the numbers, 166,808, and then max per application 1499, recommendation of 64,529. I'm just, are we giving them 64 or?
Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you. Through the chair. So in 2021, Council approved core operating and community group funding for the years 2022 and 2023. At that time, the Curling Club had not submitted a community group funding request. So for the 2023 year, this is the only opportunity for community group funding eligible and available to them. So that would be the reason for the request through this funding stream.
I certainly supplementally. Sure. I'm just wondering, I really like what Director Miller had said. Perhaps we should be setting this one aside and getting more information and making a proper decision based looking at all the factors. So should it still be left in here, or is that going to thwart the process?
I guess the question, Ms. Cajolet, is if this decision is delayed, is that a problem?
Through the chair, certainly administration could provide information prior to budget deliberations. So the only impact would, if the other recommendations were accepted and approved, the only impact would be to the Curling Center, and administration would work with them to provide that information back to council in a timely manner.
Councillor Blackmore.
Even though I've asked a lot of questions about the Curling Club's finances, it's really just an effort to try and understand where they're at. And I truly believe that the Curling Club is working very hard at becoming more sustainable. They're never going to be sustainable because of the type of sport they are. But, you know, the same applies to swimming and hockey arenas. They're always difficult and rely on public funding in order to exist. And so I'm supportive of the motions coming forward today. I would like more information in the future, but is simply to have a better understanding of what's happening in our community and what kind of resources are required in our community. And Director Nicolay, if one of the things you could include is how those organizations stack up against each other, because I don't think that we want to be seen as being pro-curling and anti-lacrosse or anything like that. We want to have a somewhat level playing field. And so that for those reasons, I think that's what drove me to ask the questions about financing today. But I do believe that the Curling Club works really hard to, and is continuing to work really hard to become more sustainable. I'm not sure that's true of all organizations, but I certainly think it is true of the Curling Club. So even though we've asked a lot of questions today, I think that I certainly am supportive of the allocations that you're recommending.
It's Councillor Blackmore, Councillor O'Toole, and then I'll get in the queue.
Yeah, I as well am in supportive of the recommendations. And when it comes to funding the Curling Club, they've had a lot of national coverage on national TV, radio, and back when we used to have a newspaper, it was all over the newspapers as well. There is a very expensive price for that, cost, and we're getting it because of the Curling Club. You know, we've had Canada Games here, we've had lots of other things. So we do get the media attention, and people know about Grande Prairie, whether it's summer games, winter games, Arctic winter games, that kind of stuff. And these are facilities that we need sometimes to host these facilities, and I really don't want to lose this. My answer is they are definitely losing revenue from previous years because it's just one of those sports that isn't cool anymore, I guess, is what Colin had mentioned at this moment. You know, it's just not popular. And maybe it's not cool either. I don't know. But I think it is worth our while to continue supporting this organization. And I just wanted some information, and we're going to get it. So it's not that it's going to change my mind. I just want to know how we approach it in the future. So yes, I am in fully support of the allegation request. Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
I thought I was going after you, Mayor Clayton.
Go ahead.
No, ladies first. Okay.
You know.
I was just gonna throw it in there. For a lot of our facilities, we tender out contracts for bar service or like food services and stuff like that. A lot of what we do at the curling club, like their main focus is to keep the building running, under my understanding. So the main paid person there is literally there just to run and operate the building, to make sure that, the restaurant's kicking out food, not losing too much money. And the focus really isn't on curling. I think Councillor Lehner's mentioned, the person that just walked in the door is pretty much making a pittance when it comes to operating the curling club, and that's true. And I think part of the growth of the sport happens when you can put your focus in the sport. And I think a large part of their focus right now has been on the building rather than the sport. And I think curling has a great opportunity to grow. And as Councillor O'Toole mentioned earlier, we've gotten lots of national and international coverage from several curling events that have hit our city over the last couple of years. So it can be a really great thing, and it is important to our community for all ages, from seniors to youth. And I think these are considerations, and definitely a further report to understand what our contributions are, where they're going, and what kind of maybe the curling club's 5-year strategic plan that they came and presented a little bit on a few meetings ago, I think would be awesome for us to all gain a little further understanding. So just comments. Thanks.
Councillor Berg.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. In some ways, I wonder if the issue isn't curling, but rather this big building and the cost to run it. So I am supportive of what's being recommended here. I also do like more information, but that's all encompassing of all organizations, just so that I know what the city's investing in, and I see it as an investment, not necessarily a cost. So I just wanted to say that I am in favor of this and that we move forward, and come budget time, hopefully we have enough information on all organizations throughout the city. Thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I think just through what I've been hearing from all the other councillors, and I too, it's not the issue of the curling club and what they do or what their focus is in the future. I think it's just our understanding of how much money is going into that facility outside of what the organization is doing. So this number doesn't bother me. I just would like to see assistance from the city in assisting them with their 5-year plan and what we're looking at, right, in the future. Are we looking at $1 million parking lot? Are we looking at, assisting them with marketing or personnel? It's not the fact that their business model is not working. They're moving ahead, but it's just the bigger picture of it. Where do we go from here?
Thanks, Councillor Bosch. I just wanted to echo some of the comments that were made. I think what's important here, in my opinion, is us to have a fair understanding of where we're spending our taxpayer dollars. This is not our money to spend. It's other people's money. We need to have a fair understanding of where we're spending it. So if we want to support all sports, great. But we still need to see the ROI on that, because it doesn't make sense that we're just going to continually put money into sports. And if we don't feel comfortable with what we're putting the money into for various reasons, the sport A could be have low enrollment. The sport could have low recognition or understanding in the community. There are things that we can support sport in, such as facilities, but also there are things that we can support, through the Grande Prairie Sport Connection. They bring light to new sports all the time. So if there are other sports that need more focus, then let's support them that way. I think the biggest point for me is not about picking one sport over the other, but about making sure that we're spending our money wisely. So I look forward to the additional information, and I see no one else in the queue, so I would look for business arising, please. Councillor Blackmore.
As soon as I can see. I would move that that committee recommend council approve the 2023 community group enhancement funding as presented in table 1, and that we approve the operational funding of $12,000 for Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club for the 2023 year from the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund, that we approve the reallocation of funding provided to the Curling Center through a lease commitment to community group funding operating grant effective 2023, and direct administration to submit a mid-year capital budget request to hire professional services of up to $20,000 to evaluate the feasibility of converting the Grande Prairie Curling Center to a year-round facility. And
Mr. Question, sorry, go ahead.
And in speaking to this motion, I think that one of the things that our taxpayers look for when they pay us that amount every June, end of June, is that we do support those organizations in the community that could otherwise not be viable.
Thank you for that. Comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, definitely supported. But one thing I did want to highlight is the Arctic Winter Games legacy funding to GP Speed Skating. Certainly support it because this is only our second year giving funding to that organization. I just hope that going into next year, if we get this request, we find another funding source for that. And the reason for that is, for me, I think we should be saving those funds for new opportunities for kids and sport in the community. And speed skating still qualifies to new as me because it's only the second year we're giving them funding. But I don't think it would be fair to potential new sports in the community to continue to eat up this money year after year after year with this one group. So definitely supported this year. Definitely think we should give them funding every year. Just don't know if this will be an appropriate funding source going into forward years.
Yeah, I echo your comments, Councillor Bressie. I do believe that there are other sport organizations in our community that would qualify. And as well, that being said, this money could be great seed money for other cultural/sport events in our community. So no other comments or questions on the motion. So call the question. Please vote. Councillor Lerners is in favor. Councillor O'Toole, how do you vote? You could just tell me. Great. Councillor O'Toole votes in favor. And that carries unanimously. That is all we have on our agenda today, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.